The rain had started as a faint drizzle, barely noticeable at first, just enough to make the cobblestone street glisten under the soft glow of the cafe lights. Emma sat by the window, her wheelchair tucked neatly against the small round table. She had chosen this spot carefully, close enough to the glass to see him arrive, far enough that she wouldn't be in anyone's way. Her reflection looked back at her faintly, a woman in a cream-colored dress, her hair curled neatly, her makeup done just right, her eyes filled with nervous anticipation. It had been years since she'd gone on a date, years since she'd allowed herself to hope. The waiter passed by with a polite smile, refilling her glass of water though she hadn't touched it. The cappuccino she ordered had long gone cold, a ring of foam drying around the edges. She kept glancing at her phone, pretending to scroll through messages that weren't there. She checked the time again, 4:47 p.m. He was supposed to arrive at 4. Maybe traffic, she thought. Maybe he's parking. Maybe he's coming right now. But each time the bell above the cafe door chimed, it was someone else. Couples laughing, groups of friends shaking off umbrellas, strangers who didn't even notice her. She smiled at her reflection again, trying to convince herself she still looked fine, that the damp curls around her face made her seem soft rather than fragile. But beneath that forced calm, her chest ached. The kind of ache that came from expecting something beautiful and getting silence instead. Outside, the street blurred in the reflection of passing umbrellas. Emma had picked this cafe because it was warm, bright, and romantic. The kind of place where she could forget for a little while that her legs no longer worked the way they once did. But as the clock's minute hand crept forward, that romantic notion dissolved into something colder. The sound of clinking cups and quiet conversation around her began to feel distant, as though the world had moved on and left her sitting in stillness. A gust of wind blew the door open briefly, carrying in the smell of rain and city air. Emma turned, hopeful for just a heartbeat, only to find it was no one she knew. Her lips parted as if to laugh at her own foolishness, but the sound that came out was closer to a sigh. She reached for her coffee, her hand trembling slightly, and forced herself to take a sip. It was bitter and lukewarm, the taste of waiting too long for something that wasn't going to happen. Her phone buzzed suddenly and her heart leapt, only to sink again as she read the notification. A message from her rideshare app reminding her about her return trip. Not him, not an apology, just another reminder that the world kept moving, whether she wanted it to or not. She lowered her gaze to her lap, running her thumb over the edge of her dress, tracing the soft fabric between her fingers. She had imagined tonight so differently. Maybe laughter, maybe the spark of connection, maybe feeling for just a few hours, like she was part of something normal again. But now, as raindrops tapped against the window beside her, she felt small and invisible. A tear she didn't mean to shed slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, glancing around to make sure no one had seen. She hated being seen like this, fragile, abandoned, pitied. She had built her strength piece by piece after the accident, learning to move through life with grace even when the world wasn't kind. But right now that strength felt far away, hidden beneath the weight of disappointment. The waiter approached again, hesitant this time. "Would you like another drink, miss?" Emma looked up, forcing a polite smile. "No, thank you," she said softly. Her voice wavered on the last word. As he walked away, she looked out again at the passing crowd. People hurrying through the drizzle, couples sharing umbrellas, laughter echoing faintly. Life went on, and she sat there, waiting for someone who had already decided she wasn't worth showing up for. Her fingers tightened around her phone. She wanted to text him, to demand an explanation. But what would that change? What could she say that didn't sound like pleading? Instead, she turned the screen off and placed it face down on the table. The light outside shifted as clouds rolled over the sun, dimming the world to a softer gray. The street looked lonelier now, the cafe quieter, and Emma, sitting there in her wheelchair by the window, looked like a painting of solitude, one where hope was still faintly visible, but fading fast. The rain had stopped by the time Emma finally wheeled herself out of the cafe. The air carried that clean, damp smell that comes after a shower, a blend of wet pavement, coffee, and the faint sweetness of distant flowers. The world outside glimmered faintly, city lights reflecting off puddles scattered along the cobblestone street. She pulled her cardigan closer around her shoulders, the chill biting a little harder now that the sun had dipped behind the buildings. Her phone sat silent in her lap. No messages, no calls, Nothing from him. She had stared at the screen one last time before leaving, waiting for that little typing bubble that never appeared. Maybe he had a reason. Maybe something had happened. But deep down she already knew. It wasn't an emergency. It was a choice. He'd seen her profile, her photos, maybe even noticed the wheelchair in one of them, and he had chosen not to come. The thought sank heavily in her chest, pressing against her heart until her throat burned. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall again. She had done enough crying for one day. Instead, she took a deep breath and pushed herself forward, her wheels squeaking faintly against the wet stones. People passed her, laughing, chatting, rushing to their next stop, and not one of them noticed the woman quietly breaking inside. A gust of wind made her pause, her hair blowing into her face. She tucked it behind her ear, staring down the long street lined with glowing cafe windows. The world looked so alive and full of movement and sound, and yet she felt completely apart from it, like she was watching from the other side of a glass wall. As she reached the edge of the cafe's awning, a small puddle blocked her path. She stopped, staring at it for a moment. It was shallow, barely an inch deep, but enough to make her hesitate. Her wheelchair wasn't meant for these uneven old streets, and she didn't have the energy to maneuver around it. Her fingers curled tightly around the rims of the wheels, frustration bubbling quietly inside her. Something as simple as a puddle, something no one else even noticed, could stop her cold. She wanted to scream, to ask why everything had to be harder for her, why even something like love seemed just out of reach now. Her chest tightened again, but before she could gather the strength to move, she heard the sound of small footsteps, quick, light, and unsteady, followed by a soft giggle. The sound was so unexpected, so pure, that she lifted her head instinctively. Down the street, a little girl in a red dress was skipping through the puddles, her tiny boots splashing water everywhere. She had a stuffed unicorn clutched in her arms, its mane damp and floppy from the rain. The girl's laughter echoed in the narrow street, drawing the attention of passers-by, and for the first time in hours, a faint smile tugged at Emma's lips. Behind the girl walked a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair slightly tousled from the wind. He wore a gray trench coat, and his expression was calm yet watchful, the kind of quiet protectiveness that comes naturally to someone who's had to be both strong and gentle at once. His gaze followed the little girl's every move, ready to step in at the slightest stumble. Emma couldn't help watching them. The man's presence was magnetic, steady, grounded, and the child's innocence seemed to pull color back into the gray evening. The way the man's eyes softened every time the little girl turned to show him something, a leaf, a puddle, a reflection, made something ache deep inside Emma's chest. When they reached the cafe, the little girl stopped, spotting Emma by the door. For a second, she hesitated. Then she smiled, that wide, fearless smile only children have, and began walking closer, clutching her unicorn tightly. Emma blinked, startled by the sudden attention. "Hi there," she said softly, her voice uncertain but kind. The little girl tilted her head, her pigtails bouncing. "You're sad," she said matter-of-factly, in the innocent way only a child could. Emma froze, unsure how to respond. The words hit her like a gentle but undeniable truth. "I guess, a little," she managed, forcing a small smile. The man approached then, his footsteps firm but unhurried. "Lily," he said gently, "come back here." His voice was deep, calm, but carried a note of warmth that made Emma's pulse quicken. The little girl turned to him, then back to Emma. "She's sad, Daddy," she insisted. "Can I give her Mr. Unicorn?" Emma's breath caught. "Oh no, sweetie, that's your—" But before she could finish, the little girl stepped closer, holding out her stuffed unicorn with both hands. The fabric was damp and worn, but it was offered with such pure, unfiltered kindness that Emma couldn't speak for a moment. The man reached them then, crouching beside his daughter. His eyes met Emma's, and for a moment the world around them went quiet, the noise of the city fading into the background. His gaze was steady, gentle, filled with something she hadn't seen in a long time, understanding. "I'm sorry," he said softly, his tone low but sincere. "She likes helping people, even strangers." Emma shook her head, still touched. "No," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "It's okay, she's very kind." The little girl looked between them, beaming, proud of her gesture. The man smiled faintly, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Come on, Lily," he murmured. "Let's not bother the lady." As they turned to leave, Emma's hand tightened on her lap. Something inside her didn't want them to go, not yet. For the first time that day, she didn't feel invisible. "Wait," she called softly. The man turned, his expression curious. Emma hesitated, her heart thudding. "Thank you," she said, looking at the little girl, then at him. "For stopping." He nodded once, slowly, as if acknowledging something unspoken between them. "You're welcome," he said quietly, his gaze holding hers for just a second longer than necessary. And in that single, fleeting moment, something changed, a faint spark that neither of them fully understood yet. But both somehow felt. The following morning, the cafe felt entirely different to Emma. The usual soft hum of chatter, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the scent of roasted beans were all there, yet everything carried a strange new weight. She found herself glancing toward the same spot near the window, half expecting to see a little girl with a stuffed unicorn and a man in a gray trench coat walking by. She had barely slept the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that child's bright, honest face, and the father's eyes deep and calm, looking at her like she wasn't broken. Like she was still someone worth seeing. She hated that she couldn't stop thinking about it. About them. About him. The bell above the cafe door chimed and her breath hitched. It was ridiculous. She didn't even know his name. But when she looked up and saw that familiar tall frame step through the doorway, her heart actually stopped for a moment. He was there, the man from last night, the one with the little girl. He looked different in the daylight, softer somehow. The raincoat was gone, replaced by a simple white shirt and dark trousers, his sleeves rolled up to the elbows. There was a quiet confidence about him, a stillness that made people instinctively move aside without him having to say a word. And then Emma saw her. The little girl, Lily, still holding the same unicorn, its mane now brushed and dry. For a second, Emma froze, unsure what to do. Should she wave, smile, pretend she hadn't noticed them? But before she could decide, Lily spotted her and squealed, "Daddy!" The sad lady. A few heads turned. Emma's face flushed. The man, her father, chuckled softly, embarrassed but patient. "Lily," he said gently, crouching beside her. "Maybe we don't call people that, okay?" Lily frowned, confused. "But she's not sad now," she said, pointing toward Emma with a proud smile. "She looks happy today." Emma couldn't help but laugh, a quiet, shaky laugh that made her cheeks warm. "I guess I do," she said softly, meeting Lily's eyes. The man straightened and approached her table, his movements calm and deliberate. "I hope we're not intruding," he said politely. His voice had that same steady warmth as before, professional but sincere. "Not at all," Emma said quickly, gesturing to the chairs. "Please sit." He hesitated, then nodded. "Only if you don't mind company." "I don't," she said, smiling faintly. And she meant it. Lily immediately climbed into the chair next to her, placing her unicorn in Emma's lap. "He missed you," she said. Emma blinked. "Oh, really?" The little girl nodded seriously. "He said you were pretty." The man coughed lightly, clearly flustered. "Lily," Emma laughed again, genuinely this time. The sound felt strange but freeing. "You don't have to be embarrassed," she teased gently. "She's very honest." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Too honest sometimes. I'm Ethan, by the way," he said, offering his hand. "Emma," she replied, shaking it. His hand was warm, firm, and the contact sent a strange flutter through her chest. They talked for a while, longer than she expected. Lily sipped hot chocolate and told wild stories about her unicorn's adventures, while Ethan and Emma spoke about simpler things, favorite cafes, the weather, work. She learned that he was the CEO of a tech company in the city, widowed 3 years ago, raising Lily on his own. She didn't know why, but something about that quiet confession made her throat tighten. At one point, Lily leaned against Emma's arm and whispered, "You should come play with us one day." Emma's heart softened. "I'd like that," she said, meaning it more than she expected. Ethan watched the exchange with a small, unreadable smile, one that reached his eyes. When Lily turned away, he said quietly, "You're the first person she's really talked to like this in months." Emma looked up, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "She's shy. She doesn't open up easily. You must have made an impression." The way he said it, with a faint smile and a touch of gratitude, made Emma's pulse quicken. "She's easy to love," she said softly, glancing at the girl now humming to herself. Ethan looked at her then, really looked, and for a brief second, the air between them changed, something unspoken lingering there, fragile and real. But then his phone buzzed. The moment broke. He checked the screen, his expression shifting slightly, a trace of tension appearing in his jaw. "I'm sorry," he said. "Work," Emma nodded. "Of course." He slipped his phone back into his pocket and stood, helping Lily with her coat. "It was good to see you again, Emma," he said sincerely. "Maybe we'll run into each other again." Lily tugged at his hand. "Daddy, can we see her again tomorrow?" Ethan smiled faintly. "We'll see." As they left, Emma watched them through the cafe window, the tall man walking with quiet strength, the little girl skipping beside him. She didn't know why her chest ached watching them disappear down the street, but for the first time in a long while she didn't feel abandoned. Instead, she felt something else, something small, tender and terrifyingly hopeful. That night, Emma couldn't stop thinking about Ethan and Lily. Every moment from the cafe replayed in her mind like a movie she didn't want to end. Lily's innocent giggle, the way Ethan's eyes softened when he looked at his daughter, the warmth in his voice when he said her name. There was something so profoundly human about them both. Not perfect, not polished, just real. For the first time in years, Emma felt a flicker of something she had long forgotten: belonging. Her apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the rain outside. She sat by the window, her wheelchair positioned so she could see the city lights blur through the mist. The world moved on as always, but inside her something had shifted. She touched the little unicorn Lily had left behind. Ethan had tried to return it when they said goodbye, but Lily had insisted. She needs him more right now. The toy still smelled faintly of rain and vanilla shampoo, and Emma smiled as she held it to her chest. She whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Lily," before setting it gently beside her bed. Days passed, and she found herself going back to the same cafe. At first she told herself it was just habit, the comfort of routine, the scent of coffee, the quiet hum of conversation. But deep down she was waiting, and then, one afternoon as sunlight poured through the cafe windows and painted the floor in gold, she heard a familiar laugh. Her heart leapt before she even turned around. There they were. Ethan, holding Lily's hand, both smiling as they stepped inside. Lily spotted her instantly and let out a small squeal of delight. "Emma!" she called, running straight to her. Emma couldn't help but laugh, opening her arms slightly as Lily hugged her waist, her tiny arms surprisingly strong for someone so small. Ethan approached a moment later, his smile softer than she remembered. "I guess we have a new favorite place now," he said. "I don't mind sharing," she replied, her voice light but trembling slightly from the joy bubbling inside her. They sat together again, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Lily ordered her usual, hot chocolate with extra whipped cream, and Emma got tea. Ethan ordered coffee black. He joked about needing it just to survive his company's endless meetings, and Emma laughed, teasing him about CEOs who didn't know how to take a break. The conversation flowed easier this time. They talked about everything: music, books, childhood dreams, the simple pleasures of life that people forget to notice. Lily chimed in now and then, showing Emma her unicorn's new magic powers, and every time she laughed, Ethan's eyes would flicker toward her, as though he couldn't help but watch. But between those moments, Emma noticed something else too: the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes, the heaviness in his shoulders when he thought no one was looking. She recognized that kind of exhaustion, the weight of carrying too much for too long. "Do you ever get tired?" she asked gently, after Lily ran off to the counter to show the barista her unicorn. Ethan blinked, surprised. "Of work? Of being strong," she said softly. For a moment he didn't answer. Then he exhaled slowly, his hand tightening around his coffee cup. "Every day," he admitted. "But I can't afford not to be. For her." He nodded toward Lily, who was now chatting animatedly with the barista. "She deserves better than what life gave her." Emma's throat tightened. "You're doing better than you think," she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. Two people who had been through different kinds of pain, but carried the same quiet strength born from surviving it. When Lily came back, she climbed into Emma's lap without hesitation, clutching her unicorn. "Can we all go to the park tomorrow?" she asked brightly. Ethan started to answer, but Emma smiled first. "I'd love to." Ethan's gaze softened. It settled then. And in that tiny moment, surrounded by coffee cups, laughter, and sunlight, something fragile and beautiful began to grow between them. Not just kindness, not just friendship, hope. The kind of hope that made Emma forget, just for a heartbeat, that she was supposed to be careful with her heart. The next day dawned warm and bright, the kind of morning that felt like a quiet promise. Emma woke earlier than usual, sunlight slipping through her curtains and landing across her face. For once, she didn't mind the early light. She had something to look forward to. She dressed carefully, choosing a soft blue blouse that brought out the color of her eyes and a white cardigan that smelled faintly of lavender. Her movements were slower, deliberate. Every turn of her wheelchair, every adjustment in the mirror felt like part of a ritual she hadn't performed in a long time, preparing to be seen. When she arrived at the park, the air was crisp and alive. Children's laughter carried through the breeze, mingling with the rhythmic bark of distant dogs and the rustle of leaves in the trees. She rolled along the paved path, her heart thrumming with anticipation, and then she saw them, Ethan and Lily sitting beneath a large oak tree, a picnic blanket spread across the grass. Lily was waving wildly, her pigtails bouncing with each motion. "Emma, over here!" she called, her voice filled with excitement. Ethan stood as she approached, his smile quiet but unmistakably warm. "You found us," he said, his tone soft, carrying that gentle steadiness she was coming to recognize. "I couldn't miss a date with the most charming girl I know," she teased. Glancing at Lily, Lily giggled, clapping her hands. "You brought Mr. Unicorn?" Emma grinned and lifted the stuffed toy from her bag. "Of course. He said he missed you both," Lily squealed, grabbing it and spinning in place before flopping down beside Emma. "He likes picnics too." Ethan chuckled as he unpacked sandwiches, fruit, and a small thermos of coffee. "I see you've made quite the impression on her," he said, watching the easy way Lily nestled close to Emma, as if she'd always belonged there. Emma looked up, smiling faintly. "She's easy to love." He paused for a moment, eyes softening. "So are you," he said quietly, almost too quietly. The words hung between them for a heartbeat before Lily interrupted with a laugh, holding up a strawberry like a jewel. "Daddy, look! It's shaped like a heart." Ethan smiled, grateful for the distraction, though his gaze lingered on Emma's flushed face for a moment longer. They spent hours there, talking, eating, laughing. Lily ran through the grass, chasing butterflies, while Emma and Ethan talked about life in the kind of unhurried way that only happens when two people finally feel safe. He told her about losing his wife, how the grief had nearly swallowed him whole until he looked into Lily's eyes one morning and realized she was all he had left. Emma listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't try to fix his pain or fill the silence, and she simply listened. When he finally looked up, his voice trembling slightly, she met his eyes and said softly, "You kept her world safe when yours fell apart. That takes strength." Ethan stared at her, something breaking open in his chest. "You say that like you understand." She smiled faintly, glancing down. "Because I do. Losing something that changes everything and then still choosing to show up. I know that kind of strength too." A hush fell between them. The world around them. Children's laughter, rustling leaves. The distant hum of life faded until all that existed was that quiet, shared understanding. Lily came running back then, out of breath, a wild grin on her face. "Dance with me, Emma," she cried. Emma blinked, surprised. "Dance?" "Yeah," Lily said, tugging her hand. "You can dance sitting down, right?" "Daddy says dancing is for everyone." Ethan smiled, pride flickering across his features. "That's right," he said gently. "Go on, Lily, show her." And so Lily began to twirl, her red dress spinning, her laughter ringing through the park like music. Emma couldn't help but laugh too, clapping along, moving her hands in rhythm. Lily spun closer, reaching out her small hand. "Your turn." Emma hesitated, looking up at Ethan. He gave a small nod, not pity, not pressure, just quiet encouragement. And then she moved. Slowly, Gracefully, she turned her chair, lifting her arms as if following invisible music. Lily laughed and spun around her, their motions syncing in a sweet, imperfect rhythm that felt more like a heartbeat than a dance. People passing by stopped for a moment, watching. Some smiled, others wiped at their eyes, but Emma barely noticed them. She was laughing and truly laughing, as Lily twirled and Ethan clapped along from the blanket, his eyes never leaving her. The golden light caught in her hair, the wind brushing her cheeks, and for that one beautiful moment, she wasn't thinking about what she couldn't do. She was free. When the music of their laughter finally faded, Lily collapsed into Emma's lap, breathless and giggling. "You're the best dancer ever," she declared. Emma smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. "Only because I had the best teacher." Ethan walked closer then, kneeling beside them. "You were incredible," he said softly. Emma met his gaze, and the world seemed to still again. There was no pity in his eyes, just admiration, respect, something deeper. And in that quiet moment under the fading sun, Emma realized she hadn't just danced with Lily that day. She'd taken her first step back into life. The days that followed became a quiet rhythm Emma hadn't known she was missing. She and Ethan started to see each other more often, not because they planned it, but because life, in its strange way, kept pulling them together. Sometimes it was at the café, where Lily would insist they all share a slice of chocolate cake, and sometimes at the park, where Emma would read while Lily played with her new friends. Every time, Ethan was there, steady, kind, and careful in a way that wasn't patronizing but deeply respectful. He never offered help unless she asked. He never stared at her chair. He just saw her, and that more than anything disarmed her. One late afternoon they were at the park again. The sky was painted in soft pinks and oranges, the kind of light that made everything feel like a dream. Lily was playing with bubbles, chasing them across the grass, her laughter echoing like music. Ethan and Emma sat under the same oak tree, watching her. Between them lay the remains of a small picnic, crumbs from sandwiches, an empty juice box, and the stuffed unicorn resting lazily beside Emma's armrest. "You know," Emma said, smiling faintly, "I used to come here a lot before the accident." Ethan turned his head slightly, his expression gentle but attentive. "You did?" She nodded, eyes drifting toward the open field. "I used to run here every morning. I knew every path, every tree. It used to be my escape." Her voice softened, a distant melancholy threading through it. "After the accident, I stopped coming. I told myself it would hurt too much to see what I'd lost." Ethan's gaze lingered on her face, then followed her line of sight. "And does it hurt?" Emma smiled faintly, tears glimmering at the corners of her eyes but not falling. "A little," she admitted, "but not like before. Now it feels different. Like the world didn't shrink as much as I thought. It just changed shape." He nodded slowly, his voice low. "Sometimes we don't lose things. We just have to learn how to find them differently." She looked at him then, really looked. And for a long moment they said nothing. The sunset reflected in his eyes, warm and soft, and Emma felt something stir inside her that she hadn't dared to name. Lily's laughter broke the silence as she ran toward them, a handful of dandelions clutched in her tiny fist. "Look, make a wish," she exclaimed, handing one to each of them. Ethan smiled. "What should we wish for?" Lily thought hard, her brow furrowed. "I wish for a puppy," she announced proudly, before blowing the white seeds into the wind. They scattered, catching the sunlight like silver dust. Emma laughed, watching the tiny parachutes float away. "What about you?" she asked Ethan. He hesitated, then looked at her. "I think I already got mine," he said softly. Her breath caught. For a second she couldn't find words. His tone wasn't flirtatious. It was honest, tender, carrying something real. She tried to speak, but before she could, Lily's voice piped up again, her small hands tugging at Emma's sleeve. "Your turn," the little girl said impatiently. Emma smiled through the lump in her throat. She closed her eyes and blew gently, watching the dandelion seeds dance into the fading light. "What did you wish for?" Lily asked eagerly. Emma glanced at Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe for courage." Lily looked puzzled. "Courage for what?" "To try again," Emma said softly, almost to herself. Ethan's eyes softened. "That's a beautiful wish," he murmured. They stayed there until dusk, the air growing cooler as the sky deepened into violet. Lily fell asleep in Ethan's lap, her small fingers still tangled in his shirt. Emma watched the peaceful rise and fall of the child's chest, then looked at Ethan, his hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder, his expression serene in the twilight. "She's lucky to have you," Emma said quietly. He looked up, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I think it's the other way around." A soft silence followed, the kind that wasn't empty but full, of understanding, of warmth, of something beginning to take root. When it was finally time to go, Ethan helped pack their things. He didn't ask to push her chair, just walked beside her, matching her pace. The path was dimly lit by lampposts, their glow spilling like gold onto the pavement. As they reached her car, he turned to her. "Emma," he said, his voice hesitant but sincere. I don't usually do this, but would you maybe have dinner with us? A real dinner, not coffee or sandwiches." She blinked, surprised. "You mean like a date?" He smiled softly. "If you'd like it to be." Her pulse quickened, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. Fear and joy tangled inside her, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through her chest. Finally she nodded, her voice trembling but sure. "I'd like that." Ethan's smile deepened, quiet and full of something genuine. "Good, tomorrow night?" "Tomorrow night," she repeated. As he walked away, carrying his sleeping daughter, Emma sat there for a long time, the breeze brushing gently against her face. The night air smelled like rain and possibility. For the first time in years, she didn't feel broken. She felt alive. The next evening arrived faster than Emma expected. She had spent most of the day convincing herself it wasn't a big deal. Just dinner, just friends. But her reflection in the mirror told a different story. Her hands trembled slightly as she brushed her hair, the same nervous flutter she used to feel years ago before a first date. The thought made her laugh softly. It had been so long since she'd even used that word, date. Her best friend Mara, who lived 2 doors down, had come to help her get ready. "You're glowing," Mara teased, adjusting the soft cream scarf around Emma's shoulders. "Don't you dare tell me this isn't a date." Emma blushed. "It's dinner. That's all." "Dinner with a handsome CEO who looks at you like you hung the stars?" "Sure," Mara smirked. "Just dinner." Emma laughed, shaking her head. "He's different, Mara. He doesn't look at me like everyone else does. He doesn't see the chair first." Mara's teasing expression softened. "Then maybe you should let yourself be seen, Em. Really seen." Those words lingered long after Mara left. When Ethan's car pulled up outside her building, the city had already begun to glow with evening lights. She saw him through the window, stepping out in a dark navy suit, his hair slightly tousled, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. Lily was beside him, dressed in a pale pink dress, her hair neatly braided, grinning ear to ear. Emma's heart melted instantly. When she wheeled to the door, Ethan looked up and smiled, a real warm smile that reached his eyes. "You look—" He paused, searching for words, his voice softening. "Beautiful." Emma blushed, glancing down. "You're not so bad yourself." Lily rushed forward, handing her the flowers. "Daddy said they're lilies like me." She giggled proudly. Emma smiled, taking them gently. "They're perfect. Thank you, sweetheart." Ethan held the car door open as she maneuvered in, his movements natural, never hesitant or pitying. The ride was comfortable, filled with Lily's chatter about her day and Ethan's quiet laughter. Emma found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, the way his jaw relaxed when he smiled, the way his eyes softened when Lily spoke. He carried so much love without saying much at all. The restaurant they arrived at was elegant but cozy, with warm amber lighting and soft piano music drifting through the air. Ethan had chosen a private corner near the window that overlooked the city skyline. "This is beautiful," Emma whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. "I wanted you to be comfortable." Dinner was easy, conversation flowing like a song. Lily sat between them, animatedly describing her unicorn's new magical adventures while Ethan and Emma laughed, filling in the details as if they'd been doing this for years. Between bites, Emma found herself studying Ethan. The way he listened when she spoke, really listened, like every word mattered. He didn't rush to fill silences. He didn't look away when she mentioned her accident. At one point, she said quietly, "I used to think I'd never have a night like this again." He looked up, his eyes soft. "Why?" "Because I thought no one would ever see me as more than This, she said, motioning slightly toward her wheelchair. Ethan's expression didn't waver. Emma, when I look at you, I don't see limits. I see strength. I see someone who still chooses to show up for life no matter how much it's taken from her. That's rare. His words hit something deep inside her, unraveling the fear she'd been carrying for years. She swallowed hard, blinking back the sudden sting in her eyes. You make it sound so easy to believe that. He smiled gently. Maybe you just needed someone to remind you. For a moment their eyes locked, and everything else in the room, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the piano, faded into a soft blur. Then Lily interrupted with a grin. Daddy, you're staring. Ethan laughed, embarrassed. I was not. Yes, you were, Lily teased, giggling. You like her. Emma covered her face, laughing, her cheeks pink. Lily, the little girl shrugged, unapologetic. It's okay. I like her too. Ethan shook his head, smiling helplessly. I can't argue with that. After dinner, they walked, or rather strolled, along the river path outside the restaurant. The city lights shimmered on the water, and Lily skipped ahead, singing softly to her unicorn. Ethan and Emma moved slower side by side. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed myself like this, she said softly. I'm glad, he replied, glancing at her. You deserve it. Emma looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan, I don't want to be just someone you feel sorry for. He stopped walking then, turning toward her fully. Emma, he said gently, do I look like a man who pities you? Their eyes met, steady, unflinching, and for the first time she truly believed him. No, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Good, because what I feel isn't pity. Her heart thudded in her chest. Then what is it? Ethan hesitated, his gaze softening. Something I haven't felt in a long time. Before either could say more, Lily called from ahead. Come on, slowpokes. They both laughed, the tension melting into something warm and easy. As they caught up to Lily, Emma glanced at Ethan, her chest full of something fragile and bright. The beginning of a feeling she had almost forgotten how to trust. That night, when he dropped her home, Ethan walked her to the door. Lily was asleep in the back seat, her unicorn tucked under her arm. Thank you, Emma said softly. For tonight. For everything. He smiled, his voice low. No, Emma, thank you for letting me in. For a second, neither moved. The night was quiet, the street lamps casting a soft glow around them. Then Ethan did something small, simple, but it made her breath catch. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle, reverent. Good night, Emma, he said softly. She smiled, her voice trembling just slightly. Good night, Ethan. As his car pulled away, Emma sat by the window, the bouquet of lilies in her lap. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a woman waiting for her life to start again. She was already living it. Days turned into weeks, and what began as a chance encounter at a cafe slowly wove itself into something deeper. A quiet rhythm of shared mornings, laughter, and the kind of understanding that didn't need words. Ethan and Lily visited Emma often. Sometimes they brought pastries from the same cafe where everything had begun. Other times they just showed up with board games or stories about their day. Lily would run to Emma's apartment door first, knocking eagerly, her voice echoing through the hallway. Miss Emma, we brought cookies. Each visit felt like sunlight breaking through a window that had been closed too long. Emma had once lived a life measured by appointments, therapy sessions, and silence. But now the sound of Lily's giggles filled the corners of her apartment, and the sight of Ethan's calm smile across her kitchen table made the walls feel alive again. One rainy afternoon, Ethan arrived alone. Lily was at school. The rhythmic tapping of rain against the glass seemed to hush the world. Emma was sitting by the window, sketching in her notebook, lost in thought. You draw, Ethan said softly, stepping closer. She smiled faintly, glancing up. Used to. I stopped after the accident, but lately, I've started again. He looked at the sketch. A simple line drawing of a woman sitting under an umbrella with a child beside her. The faces were only half formed, but the emotion was unmistakable. Warmth, safety, love. It's beautiful, he murmured. Emma shrugged, a little shy. It's just something to keep my hands busy. He pulled a chair beside her, his gaze still on the paper. You're too humble. There's life in that drawing. It's like you're remembering something you thought you lost. Her hand stilled on the pencil. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. He was right. For a while, they sat in silence, the soft patter of rain filling the space between them. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice lower, gentler. Emma, do you ever think about what you want next? She looked out the window, watching droplets race each other down the glass. I used to make plans, she said quietly. Big ones. I wanted to travel, open a small art studio, maybe teach kids someday. Then after the accident, I stopped thinking about next. I thought my story was already over. He turned slightly toward her. And now? She hesitated. Now, I'm starting to believe maybe it's not over yet. Ethan's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. It's not. You're just on a different page. Something about his tone, the certainty in it, made her chest tighten in the best way. After a pause, she asked softly, And you? What do you want next?
He exhaled, leaning back in his chair.
Honestly, I want to stop running. She frowned slightly. Running from what? From the ghosts of what I've lost, he admitted. My wife's gone and I've spent years pretending I was fine. Building the company, raising Lily, all while avoiding the truth that I'm lonely. His honesty caught her off guard. Ethan never talked about himself that way. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Finally, she whispered, You don't have to carry all of that alone, Ethan. He met her gaze, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. Maybe I don't have to anymore. The air between them thickened, not uncomfortable but full of unspoken things. Then, without overthinking it, Ethan reached across the table and covered her hand with his. It was a simple gesture, but the warmth of it felt grounding, real. She didn't pull away. Outside, the rain slowed, leaving behind the faint scent of wet earth and spring. Later that evening, when Lily came by after school, she climbed into Emma's lap with her picture book. Can we read? She asked, snuggling close. Ethan smiled from the couch as Emma began reading, her voice soft and full of warmth. Halfway through, Lily fell asleep, her small hand still tangled in Emma's. Emma looked over at Ethan, her heart full. She's beautiful, she whispered. He nodded, his voice barely audible. So are you. That night after they left, Emma sat in the quiet, her heart trembling with a kind of peace she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since the accident, she didn't feel broken. She felt seen, completely wholly seen, and the thought of tomorrow didn't scare her anymore. It made her hope. It was a crisp Saturday morning, the kind that made the world feel cleaner, softer, as if the air itself carried a promise. Emma had been awake early, sunlight spilling through her curtains as she hummed to herself, arranging a small breakfast table by the window. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this light, this whole. She had plans to meet Ethan and Lily at the park near the city lake. Lily had called the night before, excitedly explaining, We're having a picnic, Miss Emma. Daddy said you have to bring your favorite snacks. Emma had laughed, her heart glowing at the invitation. She packed fresh fruit, a few sandwiches, and the sketchbook she'd started drawing in again, though she wasn't sure she'd ever show Ethan what was inside. When she arrived at the park, the autumn leaves were golden rust, painting the ground in warm hues. She spotted Ethan and Lily beneath a large oak tree. Lily was spinning in circles, her laughter bright and wild, while Ethan stood nearby holding a basket, pretending to look exasperated but smiling all the same. Over here, Lily shouted, waving. Emma smiled as Ethan walked toward her, his hand slipping easily into his pockets, that familiar calmness radiating off him. You're right on time, he said softly. I didn't want to miss the picnic, she teased, glancing toward Lily. She made it sound like an event of national importance. Oh, it is, he said, a grin tugging at his lips. She even tried to make me wear a flower crown. Emma laughed, a sound that came out freer than she expected. I would have paid to see that. He leaned slightly closer, his voice low. Maybe next time. Her heart stuttered a little at the warmth in his tone. She looked away quickly, pretending to adjust the blanket spread on the grass. The three of them settled under the tree. Lily plopped down between them, humming to herself while making sandwich castles. Ethan and Emma fell into easy conversation about everything and nothing. The kind of talk that felt natural, like two old souls rediscovering laughter together. At one point, Lily tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Daddy, can we go see the ducks?" Ethan glanced at Emma. "Want to come?" Emma hesitated for a moment. The uneven path toward the lake made her nervous. Her wheelchair sometimes struggled with soft ground. But before she could answer, Ethan crouched beside her. "We'll go slow," he said gently. "I've got you." Something about the simplicity of those words, "I've got you," made her throat tighten. She nodded, and together they moved toward the lake, Lily skipping ahead. Ethan walked beside Emma, one hand occasionally steadying the chair when the path dipped. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. The silence between them was comfortable, full of understanding. When they reached the lake, Lily ran to the edge, tossing bits of bread to the ducks. The water shimmered under the sunlight, and the reflection of the trees danced like a painting. "This place," Emma said softly, "it feels like a dream." Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. "You make it feel that way." She turned to him, startled, and found that his gaze was already on her. Steady, warm, and unguarded. "I mean it," he continued quietly. "Before you, it was just days. Work, sleep, repeat. Then you came along and suddenly everything felt alive again." Emma blinked, trying to steady her breath. "Ethan." He shook his head gently, eyes softening. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." Lily's laughter echoed nearby, breaking the tension. She was kneeling at the edge of the water, fascinated by a mother duck and her ducklings. Ethan and Emma moved closer, watching her together. "She's happy," Emma said. "She is," Ethan replied. Then after a pause, "She's happy because you're here." Emma looked at him, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "You give me too much credit," he smiled faintly. "No, I just finally learned to notice the right things." The breeze picked up, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the garden nearby. For a moment they stood there, two souls who had both known loss, both carrying pieces of their past like scars. And yet in that moment, they weren't defined by pain. When they returned to their picnic spot, Lily had fallen asleep under the tree, her head resting on Emma's lap. Emma's fingers brushed the child's hair gently, her other hand still resting near Ethan's on the blanket. The sun dipped lower, painting the world in gold. Ethan turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emma, I never thought I'd find peace again. But when I'm with you, it feels like I finally can breathe." She met his gaze, her heart trembling. "And I never thought I'd be loved again," she whispered back. He reached out, his fingers brushing hers, not out of impulse, but out of something deeper, unspoken. Certain, for the first time in a very long time, Emma didn't feel broken or forgotten. She felt chosen. She felt home. As the last rays of sunlight filtered through the leaves, Ethan whispered, "Maybe this isn't the end of our stories. Emma, maybe this is where they finally begin." She smiled, tears shimmering in her eyes, as the world around them faded into golden stillness, and everything broken inside her quietly began to heal. The following morning dawned gentle and quiet, the kind of morning that carries a promise of peace. Soft sunlight crept through Emma's curtains, painting her living room in honeyed light. She sat near the window, a cup of tea in her hands, watching the world stir awake. The lilies Ethan had given her weeks ago still stood proudly on the table. A little wilted now, but she couldn't bring herself to throw them away. Her thoughts wandered to the park, to Lily's laughter, to Ethan's hand brushing hers beneath the setting sun. Every memory of that afternoon played in her mind like a film she didn't want to end. She had spent so long believing her story had already reached its closing chapter, and now it felt as if the universe had turned the page for her. A gentle knock pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened the door, Ethan was standing there. No suit this time, just a soft gray sweater, jeans, and that same quiet smile that always made her heart stumble. Lily peeked out from behind his leg, clutching a bouquet of fresh daisies. "Surprise?" Lily grinned, running up to hand Emma the flowers. Emma laughed softly. "Well, aren't these the prettiest flowers I've ever seen?" Lily nodded proudly. "Daddy said they're for your smile." Ethan cleared his throat, slightly embarrassed but smiling all the same. She's not wrong. Emma placed the daisies in a small vase, her cheeks warm. "Come in, both of you." The morning melted into easy comfort, pancakes on the stove, cartoons playing softly in the background, Lily's giggles filling the air. It was simple, unplanned, and yet it felt more perfect than anything grand could have been. After breakfast, Ethan helped Emma bring her wheelchair out to the small balcony. The city stretched below them, sunlight glinting off the rooftops. Lily was inside, playing with her toys, humming quietly to herself. Ethan leaned on the railing beside her, the breeze ruffling his hair. "I wanted to see you," he said simply. Emma smiled, turning toward him. "You saw me yesterday?" He shrugged lightly. "Didn't feel like enough." Her heart fluttered, and for a moment she didn't know how to respond. Instead, she looked out over the city, the wind brushing through her hair. "You know," she said softly, "for a long time I thought love was something I didn't deserve anymore. After the accident, I shut myself off. I convinced myself that people only saw the chair, not the person in it." Ethan listened, silent, patient, the way he always did. "But then you came along," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "And you didn't look at me with pity. You looked at me like I was still whole, like I was still allowed to dream." Ethan's gaze softened. He took a small step closer. "That's because you are whole, Emma. You always were. You just needed someone to remind you." Her eyes shimmered as she met his. "You reminded me." He smiled gently. "You did the same for me. You made me stop running. You made me believe that maybe love doesn't have to hurt to be real." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind and the faint laughter of Lily drifting from inside. Then Ethan slowly reached out, brushing his fingers against Emma's cheek, his touch hesitant but full of meaning. "Emma," he whispered, "you've changed my life and mine and Lily's. You brought light back into a house that's been dark for too long." She blinked, a tear slipping free. "You did the same for me." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe we're both finally home." He leaned forward just enough for their foreheads to touch. A quiet, tender connection that said everything words couldn't. The world around them seemed to fall away, leaving only warmth and the sound of two hearts finally beating in rhythm again. From inside, Lily's voice called out cheerfully, "Daddy!"
"Miss Emma, come see."
"I made us a family drawing." They both laughed softly, the spell breaking but not fading. Ethan helped Emma back inside, where Lily proudly held up a crayon drawing. 3 smiling figures holding hands beneath a big yellow sun. On top, in bright, uneven letters, she had written, "Me, Daddy, and Miss Emma, our happy day." Emma pressed a hand to her chest, her eyes filling. Ethan knelt beside Lily, his arm brushing Emma's as they both admired the picture. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered. "It's perfect," Ethan said, glancing at her, and this time he didn't look away. The day passed in laughter, in simple moments that stitched themselves into something deeper. When the sun began to set, they all sat together on the couch, Lily asleep between them, her small hand resting in Emma's. Ethan turned to her one last time, his voice low. "Emma, I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I don't want to face it without you." Her lips trembled as she smiled. "Then don't." He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally as if they'd always belonged that way. Outside, the city lights flickered to life, but inside that quiet apartment, the glow between them was warmer, softer, infinite. And for the first time in years, Emma didn't feel like the woman who had been left behind. She felt like the woman who had been found, by love, by hope, by a family she never saw coming. The woman who was finally home,